A friend of mine took a ton of garlic and ground it up and then froze it in a thin layer. I thought that was a great tip. And then I did it at home and my daughter was like, yeah, everybody's doing that on TikTok. Welcome back to our pantry series on everyday food. I'm really excited because today I'm using one of my all-time favorite, most used pantry items, whole peeled tomatoes in a can, because I think that they're super duper versatile and we all love the flavor. I'm sure you've heard this before, but they're processed when they're the most ripe, so they're often the most delicious, especially in the winter, and they're great for making sauces and soups and all kinds of stuff. Today I'm making a delicious baked ziti with a sausage-based tomato sauce. So to start off that sauce, I have a pound of sausage, and it's been removed from the casing, and you want to start cooking that before you add your tomatoes. So I'm going to get it into the pot right now and just break it up a little bit with a wooden spoon. Once you get your sausage starting to cook, you can get everything else ready and sort of go back and forth. That's why I like cooking and prepping close together. What you're looking for is for the sausage to start cooking, break down. I've said this before too, but sausage is such a great starting point for a sauce like this because it already has so many flavors in it, right? It has garlic, it might have fennel, it might have a little bit of spice if you're using spicy sausage. So it's a really good base for sauces like this because you can cut down on ingredients. And the ziti recipe is simple, but it has a tomato sauce, and it also has a bechamel, which is a thickened milk and cheese sauce. So there's a couple of steps, but I think it's going to be really worth it. Anyway, I'm going to let that sit for a sec. I have 2 cloves of garlic. I need about a tablespoon of garlic, needs to be minced. I recently saw a friend of mine did this thing where she took a ton of garlic and ground it up and then froze it in like a thin layer in a baking sheet and then cut it into little cubes, and it's really a great shortcut when you're kneading garlic because it's like instead of buying the garlic that comes in the jar, you're making your own and you're keeping it frozen so it stays really fresh and delicious tasting. I thought that was a great tip. And then I did it at home and my daughter was like, yeah, everybody's doing that on TikTok. I was like, oh my God, I thought I was being so brilliant. Or my friend was so brilliant. It's starting to get a little bit brown, so just keep an eye on it. You don't want it to burn. For a second, I thought my pot was burning, but it was just that the sausage was browning. That's the garlic. That'll go in a second. And then for the sauce, we have our whole peeled tomatoes. Now, these come in usually like a 28-ounce can. We try to use the whole can in most recipes, but sometimes we don't. And if you have leftover, they'll last for a few days in the refrigerator, or you can freeze them, which I always do. Make sure you label it so you know what it is the next time you open your freezer. It's a really good idea to keep things labeled and dated because things do go bad even in the freezer, or they'll just get like freezer burn flavor. So these are whole tomatoes. They're peeled. They have a great texture and a fresh flavor. For this recipe, I'm just crushing it with my hands. True confession, I'd rather use my food processor for this than do this because I'm always afraid I'm going to get tomato juice like splattered all over me, even though I tend not to like to use food processors and stuff as much because I don't like washing them. I don't have a dishwasher at home. So you can trust me when I tell you that you should use a food processor, that it's worth it. Whole peeled tomatoes have a nice, fresh, sort of juicy flavor. But I'm also using a can of tomato sauce. Now, tomato sauce is a more processed thing. Not like tomato sauce that you would use on pasta straight, but it's like a really great base. It has more flavorings in it. It's pureed, so it's a little bit thicker. It's kind of the best of both worlds. Now you can add the garlic to the sausage. You don't want to add it too early because you don't want it to burn. And then just cook it till it gets a little bit fragrant, which happens really quickly, especially if your pot is already hot. I can smell it now. This is the moment at which my daughter will walk into the kitchen and be like, what are you making? Always when I'm cooking the garlic. Once the sausage is almost cooked, doesn't have to completely cook through, you can add your whole peeled tomatoes and your can of tomato sauce. Okay, this is the time to be careful. Be careful. Half a cup of water. Season with salt and pepper, then bring it to a boil, reduce it to a simmer, and let it cook until all the flavors have melted. That'll take about 20 minutes. So while this is simmering, I'm gonna make my bechamel. Some of you might be thinking, well, why are we making a bechamel? It's making it complicated. Well, I think it's going to make it more delicious. It adds just a whole nother layer of deliciousness and richness to this dish, which just, you know, I think that's what people are looking for when they have a baked ziti. To start the besh, you want to melt some butter. It's 2 tablespoons of butter. And then stir in or whisk in 2 tablespoons of flour. Stir it around. Normally when we add flour to recipes and we're making a roux, that's what this is, a roux, which is a combination of butter and flour. We ask people to cook it just a little bit to cook off the raw smell. Sometimes when I write that, I'm like, do people really know what that means? But when you experience it, you'll know, because what happens is you start getting just like a tiny bit of nuttiness. The flour toasts a little bit, and that's all you're really looking for. You're not trying to get browning. This isn't a brown roux, but you don't want it to be completely raw tasting. And once you get to that level, which is very, very fast, then you can whisk or stir in your milk. 2.5 cups. You're going to want to start really, really slow and whisk in milk just a little bit at a time. I'm using a spoon, but whisk is probably better. What I try to do is add just a little bit of milk at a time, whisking until it's smooth. And then once I get like a more liquid texture, I guess, then I can add more all at once. But if you add all of your milk at once without whisking pretty vigorously, what you'll end up with is a bunch of lumps that will not disappear because they sort of cook into these little solid pieces of cooked flour. And you can see that it's already loosening up, and at this point you can add more of your milk and not worry about it getting lumpy. In order to fully activate and thicken the flour, which is thickening the milk, you need to bring it to a boil. You can use a spoon too to get into the edges. Like this whisk is a little bit big. Milk is kind of a pain in the butt when you're cooking it. It sort of sticks to the sides and gets really hard, and it's kind of hard to wash, so be careful about those edges, those corners of the pot, because not only does it stick, where it sticks it might burn. So keep an eye on it. Once it's come to a boil, you can add your cheese. It's 1/3 cup of grated parm, some nutmeg, not too much. You just want a hint of this, and then about 1/2 teaspoon of salt. So then you just let this cook. You want it to cook down just a little bit, about 10 minutes. To assemble, I have my tomato sauce with sausage. I have my bechamel made. Both of those things can be made a day or 2 ahead if you want to. Make the bechamel ahead, cover the surface with a piece of plastic wrap directly pressed to the surface so it doesn't form a skin. I have a large pot of water here. I'm going to season it with salt. And then you're going to cook 1 box, a whole pound of ziti. You can use penne for this. You can use rigatoni, any short pasta that you want. 5 minutes less than the package directions for al dente. You want it basically still crunchy in the center because it's going to cook in the oven with the sauce, with all those things, and so it's going to start absorbing some of that liquid, and you don't want it to overcook. So for this, it's about for 5 minutes is an appropriate amount of time to get really, really nicely textured pasta when it's all baked together. It's going to be layered with some Parmesan cheese and some mozzarella. I'm going to cut this up into cubes. Before you drain the pasta, make sure you save some pasta water. That's also going to get stirred together with the sauce, and that helps it finish cooking in the oven. It'll be okay if you forget it. You could actually use just regular water, but that cooking water has some salt. It has a little bit of the starch from the pasta, which helps the texture of the final sauce. So try to remember. But don't beat yourself up if you forget. I forget 50% of the time to save pasta water. Then drain it. Back in the pot. Then to this, you're going to add some of that tomato sauce. So 3 cups goes into the pasta. Half a cup of grated parm. This is more than half a cup because we're going to use more later. Half a cup of that reserved pasta water that I just talked about, should you have remembered. Give that a stir. And then about a cup of basil. You'll notice I was just stirring everything together right in this pot that I cooked it in. That's because I don't feel like washing more pots. Why should I? Some salt and pepper. Don't overdo it because remember that the bechamel has salt, the sauce has salt, the sausage had salt. You can taste it at this point. Everything is cooked, so you can taste for the seasoning and make sure that you like the way it tastes. I'll do that right now. I mean, the pasta's a little crunchy, but that's okay. Now, the assembly. And this is a 9 by 13 inch dish. Half the bechamel goes into the bottom of the baking dish, approximately. Half of the pasta mixture, 1 cup more of tomato sauce, half the mozzarella cheese. This is epic, I think. Half a cup of Parmesan. Then the remaining pasta. So what you're doing here is you're just building layers. Encasing the mozzarella in that layer of pasta will create a delicious, gooey, cheese pull worthy layer. So that's for the Instagram. Just kidding. 1 more cup of sauce. Then the remaining bechamel. It's like the best Sunday dinner. Makes a lot. Good to share. If you're a person with a lot of freezer space, you could probably double this and freeze one. With the remaining mozzarella cheese, so that was a total of 1 pound. The remainder of the parm, sprinkle on the top, and then just the remainder of the tomato sauce. It's just a little bit, but you don't want to waste that. I have a rimmed baking sheet that I've lined with parchment to put this on just in case it bubbles over. It may or may not, but better safe than sorry. Oven's at 425 degrees. This should bake until it's like bubbly and melty and amazing. That'll take about 30 minutes. And then you're gonna wanna let it cool for about 20 minutes too. Okay, you guys, this is epic and amazing and smells heavenly in here. So this has been resting for about 20 minutes. Smells incredible. Ready for eating. Look at that. Oh my God. If you want to, you can put a little bit of basil if you're fancy. Holy moly. Oh, look at that. It's rich and savory and cheesy and amazing, and you are going to love it. Please make this recipe and let me know what you think. Write in the comments below. What are your favorite canned tomato recipes? What are your favorite baked pasta recipes? Let me know. If you want more recipes like this, click like and subscribe.